So we're going to get started with the last session here. This is Tim Ellison. He's going to speak a little bit more on our Cybersecurity Awareness Day. Thank you, Tim. Take it away.
Sure. First of all, thanks everyone for coming. It's great to have you join me here for this session. And it's great to see so many people interested in technology and cybersecurity. So a little bit of information about me. My name is Tim, and I've been working in the technology field for a little more than 25 years. So I've been here a while. I actually started out in educational technology. So I was supporting the technology needs for about 26 school districts here in the Harrisburg area. So I did that for quite a while, and then I left there, went to a private company as a principal architect, did some private consulting. I also then moved into sales, and I sold some web filtering security products. And for the past 4 years, I have been a sales systems architect at Cisco Systems. So I've been in the field for a while, seen a lot of technology. I do live in the Harrisburg area, my family. I have some kids that might be some of the ages of you guys in here. So you'll also notice I have a couple things up here. We'll use these later. You don't have to write them down or anything, but I have a group of numbers and I have a domain name, www.cisco.com. So let's go ahead to the next slide. What are we going to talk about today? So today we'll talk briefly about cybersecurity in the world and how does it affect us? How does it affect me? How does it affect you? We will talk about 2 to 3 different tools that, from a security perspective, we'll dive in a little bit to figure out how they work and how they keep us more safe. We'll briefly talk about some best practices for technology use, just our day-to-day things that we use on a regular basis. We'll wrap up with a quick review and hope to have some time for questions and answers at the end. So why should we be talking about cybersecurity? So why is it so important to talk about what's going on out there in the world and why is it top of mind for a lot of people? So starting out here, we have some cybersecurity crime events that have happened that probably have made, that have definitely made the news headlines and you may or may not have heard of, but as you can see, it affects everybody. Cybercrime affects everybody. So we have businesses, we have governments, we have municipalities, and they all trickle down to us as individuals. So you may be thinking, hey, how does this affect me? I've heard of those, but it really didn't do anything. I wasn't affected, or I've never heard of those, and I certainly haven't been affected by them. So the idea behind this is that despite the rise in cybercrime, the world as a whole is moving more towards adding technology and automation to the things that happen on a day-to-day basis. And you'll see here, because of that transformation, and according to the World Economic Forum, we're looking at 85 million jobs that could be displaced because of that digital transformation. So when you hear that, as you get older, graduate, enter the workforce, that could potentially definitely affect you as individuals, right? But it's not all doom and gloom because they've also predicted and forecasting that 97 million new jobs will come up to help support that changing landscape. So we need people to manage and secure and keep things safe for this whole digital transformation. So I did see on the session agendas that there are a couple different cybersecurity career sessions. So if you're interested in cybersecurity or technology, you want to learn more, or you think you might be, I certainly check some of those out. Narrowing things down a little bit more. Those are all big things. They're all happening in the world, and it might not affect you. But coming down to us as individuals, you'll see here we're all responsible for security. Again, the World Economic Forum has said 95% of all security issues can be traced to human error. Humans, that's us, right? We're the ones out there. We use technology on a day-to-day basis. So we need to make sure we understand what's going on, how to use things, and be responsible for what we do. So personal security tools. this is where we'll spend most of our time, right? We're going to talk about 3 different security tools out there and dive in a little bit, try to understand how they work. And I hopefully have some time for questions and answers at the end, but if anybody has any questions for each section, feel free to ask me. Multi-factor authentication. First thing that we're going to talk about. So a lot there, multi-factor authentication. What does that actually mean? So I think we all know what the word multi means, more than one, right? Authentication, what does that mean? So authentication, we're talking about how can I prove to an application or web login that I am who I say I am, right? So that's kind of the authentication part of that. How many of you have usernames and passwords that you use now, whether it's for school, whether it's for different applications that you use personally? See, I have lots of usernames and passwords, right? The great thing about usernames and passwords in this context is it's also known as a factor. So we're talking about multi-factor authentication. We're talking about different ways to prove to a login, whether it's an application or a website, that we are who we say we are, right? So there's 3 main types of factors. Something we know, something we have, and something we are. So something we know, we already said, username and password, right? Or it could be a PIN or something like your phone. You need to know a set of characters to actually get into your phone, right? So something we know, something we have, which could be my phone or your phone. It could be an email address that you have access to. It could be a secure USB key. And then something we are, right? Something we are would be my fingerprint or facial recognition. So those are the 3 factors, 3 main types of factors when we talk about multi-factor authentication. So let's take a quick look here. Sorry. Let's take a quick look at kind of what that flow looks like. So the first thing, we try to access over here a website or an application, far right, and we give our first factor, right? Our username and password. That's 1, right? So, hey, application, here's my username and password, let me in. And the application says, oh, thank you. I appreciate you giving me 1 factor, but let me double check. Let me check one other way to make sure you can verify you are who you say you are. So I'm going to send a code to your phone, something I have, right? There are 3 types, something I know, something I have. Once you verify that code, then I will go ahead and let you in. So multi-factor at the end of the day is just a way of taking some of the things that you already have been using and making it more secure by not just requiring one way, but multiple ways. Couple examples. How many of you have a phone or have seen somebody have a phone that uses facial recognition? I have it on mine, right? So that's one. It's something I am. It's my facial recognition. But in the background, I also need to know the PIN for my phone. And it's both of those factors that let me into my phone. Another example, I have an application that I use pretty regularly, but it requires my username and password, the 1 factor. It requires facial recognition, right? Something I am, that's 2 factors. And once it goes through both of those, it also says, okay, let me check one more thing. And I'm going to send something to your phone that you need to verify. And it has to match up before I let you in. So that's 3. So 3 different factors. So you might hear the term 2-factor, which is just 2 different ways of proving you are who you are. And multi-factor could be 2 or more. So you might hear those terms interchangeably, but just understand the more ways to help identify proving you are who you are, say you are, is going to be more secure for you at the end of the day. So I did a little research, and I hope if anybody's interested in multi-factor authentication, certainly take a look out there. But there's 3 or 4 different multi-factor options out there that I kind of put up here. So you might come across these certainly at the end of each one of my little sections. I have some that I've found, but you have to go out, figure out kind of how it works for you and what's going to work best for you as you start trying to look at some of these tools to help make your how you use technology a little more secure. The next thing we're going to talk about, DNS filtering. So DNS filtering, what is DNS? How about this? Does anybody remember what a phone book was? When it was a physical copy? Yellow pages, white pages. I remember I used to get on my front porch or my mailbox when I was a kid. I was seeing like, hey, that's pretty cool. How about your phone? If everybody has phone, you also have a phone book on your phone. And what's it really doing? What are the two main pieces when it comes to a phone book? Any guesses? Anyone raise your hand? Phone numbers match to what? Names. Perfect. We as humans remember names much easier than numbers, right? So in my phone book, I can go through mom, dad, uncle, whatever. I can remember everybody's name, but I don't remember everybody's number. And you couldn't ask me if I lost my phone, I'd probably not know everybody's telephone number, right? So that's why DNS was created, but it created for a computer. So DNS, or domain name system, was created to easily match up names to numbers when you browse the internet. At the beginning, I had two things up there, a group of numbers and a domain name. Who can tell me the group of numbers? You write it down? At the beginning, on my introduction, I had a group of numbers and a domain name. What was the group of numbers? How about the name? What was the domain name? Cisco.com, right? So that's just an example of why we use DNS. So DNS helps us as humans remember, hey, Google.com, Cisco.com. We don't have to remember all the numbers associated. Now, DNS isn't matching up those names with telephone numbers. It's matching it up with a different number that we call an IP address. So very high level, if any of you type into a browser and go to google.com, in order to get to google.com, you need to have an IP address associated with that name. Really interesting topic. So when you leave here, go ahead and research IP addresses, but that was why DNS was created. So we could only have to remember names of where we wanted to get to. And then from there, DNS would take care of making sure we got the correct information to get there. So let's take a quick look at this diagram here. And so we can understand how DNS works, and then understand how we can use DNS filtering to help make it more secure. So we're at the client computer. We type into the browser www.google.com, and we hit enter. In the background, our computer sends information to the recursive DNS server right there in the middle, and it says, how do I get to google.com? In DNS, that recursive server does three things. It checks the root DNS server, it checks the top level domain server, and it checks the authoritative server. And that authoritative server sends back the IP address. Remember, we have to match up a name to an IP address because that's what we need. Sends it to the recursive server, and then that sends it back to us. Now, that took me a lot longer to explain than it actually happens when you're on your browser, right? You type it in within a couple seconds, if not less, if you're going to Google. Yes.
Yeah, the IP address is how computers used to communicate with each other.
That's correct. That's what I'm saying. Every name needs an IP address to actually communicate out to the web.
And if you don't have an IP address, you're never going to access the web.
That's why DNS is super important, right? We need to understand matching up names to IPs. Now, how can we make this more secure? What DNS filtering does is it takes that recursive server right there in the middle, because that is what's giving us all of the information that we need. It's programming that DNS server with a known list of IP addresses and names that could potentially be harmful to you at the client computer. And that's where the filtering comes in. If I said at the computer, I want to go to virus.com, DNS, I'll ask the DNS server, the recursive DNS server, how do I get there? And that says, hey, I have pre-programmed in my system that's a bad site. It's going to cause a malware on your computer. It's going to cause a virus. So I'm not going to let you get there because I have control over where you're going. That's just another way. So DNS, we use it all the time. DNS filtering is just an add-on on top of where we can be more secure in the tools that we use every day. Again, there's a few different filtering options. So if you go back, take a look at those. You might run across these 4 or 5 that I have listed here. and really interesting stuff. DNS. There's a lot more behind DNS. There's some caveats. There's some other things, but at a high level, that's how it works, and that's how we can help protect ourselves. Password manager. All right. So we've all talked about we have usernames and passwords. How many passwords should we have? We want to guess.
As many accounts as we have.
As many accounts as we have. Any other guesses? 5 or 6. All right. One more.
I'd say as many times as you log into a different site.
Awesome. Right. You guys are both right. For every login that we have, best practices says we should use a different password for each one of those accounts. Now, a different password for every account and a strong password. What are some characteristics of a strong password? Do we want to guess? Not be your name. Not be your name. Perfect. Right. Have special characters in there. All right, perfect. Not your birthday. Not known facts, right? Not known facts about yourself. There's a few other things that we want to make sure. Password length. So a 3-character password is going to be easier to figure out than a 14-character password. So when we talk about strong passwords, we're talking about longer passwords. We're talking about things that aren't known about ourselves, and some of the important things: capital letters, lowercase letters, special characters, right? And numbers. So they're all things that we have to remember. We need a separate password for every login. We need a strong password that has all those things. How are we supposed to remember all that? Do we write it down on a piece of paper and put it in our wallet? Or do we tape it to our monitor on our keyboard, right? Those wouldn't be very secure, because if I tape it to my monitor, yes, I can access that information I need. I might have a separate password for every account, but anybody can walk by and see it. And that's where password manager comes into play, right? Here's another tool that can help keep us safe and store our information for us. So a little bit how that password manager works. Every password manager, as far as I know and kind of research, requires one master password to get in and kind of see all the information, right? But it's still better than remembering, let's say, 10 different logins with strong passwords. You only have to remember one. So that's really what that password manager is for. And we're going to talk about 3 different ways in terms of how the password manager kind of stores that information for you. So remember that we need a master password. That master password gets us access to our secure, where we have multiple logins and multiple strong passwords. So, so the first way that a password manager can work is storing your file locally to one device, right? So you set up your device, you set up your password manager, you set up your master password, and that encrypts your file with all your information on it. But because it's only on one device, what happens if you have that on your home computer, and then you're out walking around the city and you want to access your passwords? You pick up your phone and you're like, oh, all my passwords are back home. I don't have access to them, right? That's one of the downsides of having a locally stored file. The other thing is, what happens if something happens to that computer? You don't have a backup of it. You're going to lose that information, and then you have to go through a bunch of hoops to get your password back. So how do we solve that? So they came out with an online password manager. So your passwords are stored in the internet, or up in the cloud, is what we call it, right? At a site. And that way, you can log into the internet across all of your devices, doesn't matter where you are. If you have an internet connection, you use your master password, you log in, and you can get access to all of your passwords. So much better, but what's the downside? If you don't have an internet connection, right, you're not going to be able to access them. So out of those two, you really have to kind of decide what's going to work best for you. And I definitely recommend, along with the other 2 technologies, you kind of take a look at that. This last one is a little bit off. It's not the same as storing all of your passwords. The state dish token basis really just means you still need a master password, but you have a physical key. So physical USB key, you need two things still, your master password, you plug in your physical key into your computer, then you can access your logins that way. But the same thing with having only a single device that has your information on it. If you lose that key, you're going to need to get that replaced and figure out how to reset all your passwords. All right, password manager options. Again, take a look at them. Again, these are all tools that we can all use individually. Remember, we're all responsible for security. So some of these things, do a little research, figure out which ones might work for you, and try them out. Personal security practices. So I think we all use technology on a regular basis. We might have devices of our own. We might use school devices. But here are some things that just keep in mind from a security practice on what you should be doing. So keeping your software up to date. Lots of times manufacturers come out with new software updates, and it's not just new features for you, right? A lot of times they're fixing security pieces that might be wrong with their software, and they want you to put it on there to help protect and keep you safe. Antivirus protection and firewall on your local devices, right? That might help in a case where you might download a file by accident. And once it's on your device, the antivirus can help kind of delete it or quarantine it so it doesn't affect you. We talked about these two, right? Strong passwords, different password for every site. Make sure you use them password managers so that you can keep track of those and don't reuse your same passwords for a lot of logins. Two-factor or multi-factor authentication. More than one way to identify and prove that you are who you say you are. That's what we're looking for. This is a big one. Be suspicious of communication you receive. If you don't know who the email is coming up from, for instance, don't open it. Really what you're trying to do is protect yourself from opening an email and clicking on a link that might download a bunch of viruses or things on your computers that shouldn't be there. Same with phone calls, text. If somebody calls you and says, hey, I'm from so-and-so, I'm from your bank. I need all your information. Don't give that out. If you're concerned about it, you hang up with them, you call your bank directly. So you're initiating that call, and then you can figure out from there, was that a real call or was that not a real call? So remember, just be suspicious of communications that you're getting, that you're not expecting, or you don't know who they're coming from. Protecting your information, like who you are, where you live, what your telephone number is. Try not to sign up for a bunch of sites where you have to put all the information in. Your information will be out there. You want to kind of keep that secure, keep that to yourself. Only sign up for the things that you know you're going to be using and needing. Backup your data, I mentioned that already. If you have a backup of your data, if anything happens to your stuff, you can easily get it back. And you won't potentially lose things that you might need. As you continue to get older, reviewing your online accounts, making sure that they're what you expect them to do. So if you have a Facebook account or your bank accounts or those sort of things, just reviewing them, making sure that somebody hasn't gotten into it or something isn't out of the ordinary in terms of what you've been posting or anything else like that. So that's everything in terms of that. Let's do this quick review here. Let's start with the third one. So to make it easier to have a complex password for each of your logins, but also store them securely, what should you use? Any hands? Anybody remember?
Password manager.
Oh, perfect. Password manager. That's first one. I'm glad you guys remembered. That's what we want, right? We reviewed how things work. There's 3 of them. 2 or more ways to prove you are who you say you are is called what? Awesome, you guys are too smart. And lastly, in order to easily remember how to navigate to a destination on the internet, use what system?
Domain name system.
Domain name system or DNS. Awesome. That's great, guys. I'm glad you guys paid attention and you could answer those questions. Is there anybody that didn't know those or have questions about what we just talked about?
You know, I kind of do. So while you were talking about
Sure.
this, I was thinking about things that haven't changed in a long time, and I expect you and I are about the same age. So I remember back when you needed cash, like when my parents would need cash when I was a kid, they would walk up to an ATM
Mhm.
and they would put in their card. That would be something that you have. Then you
Yeah.
put in your PIN. That's something that you know.
Right?
And that was an early example of MFA. And that hasn't changed in 35 years. That has not changed, not really at all, besides maybe putting a camera
Mhm.
above that. But then on the other hand, I also remember us walking into what makes me sound old, a Sears, and trying to buy something with a credit card.
Uh-huh.
And that was something you had, but the thing that you used to prove what you are was your signature. And how that hasn't held up. But even today, as long as you have my credit card, like I almost gave that guy right there a copy of my credit card to pay for parking today. There was nothing stopping him from being able to just use that. So how is it that credit cards at point of sale is so behind compared to virtually everything else?
Yeah, I mean, the idea I think behind it is great, right? Because pins and cards haven't changed, but it's still two factors, exactly like you said. Like I have to, even if I got your debit card,
Yeah.
I put it in there. I have to try to guess what your pin is, and they have some security around that in terms of not letting might lock me out to keep the card if I haven't guessed the correct pin. So that's pretty strong, right? Credit cards themselves, hard, like, remember, 95% of security issues come from us as people. So when you're at a store with a credit card, people are supposed to be checking that ID, right? They're supposed to be looking at, hey, can I see your driver's license to make sure those signatures match? But human error, just a lot, I mean, nobody looks anymore, right? Or they have those automatic machines. I think credit cards are super convenient, but super hard to actually enforce the security across it, which is why they also have all that automation, right? So a credit card, if I'm here in Pennsylvania and all of a sudden my credit card is being used in Florida, my credit card company gets notified immediately through AI, right? Hey, Tim, you're in Pennsylvania, but your card is being swiped in Florida. Let me call you. Let me hold that. I'm gonna put a hold on your credit card and make sure that's really you using it. And if not, we're gonna hold your credit card digitally until I can send you a new one, or you can verify that was actually you. So there are definitely things in place from an AI perspective, machine learning, as it comes to credit cards, but some of it is just still human error. And that's what it comes down to a lot, and why we need to understand what's going on in technology, how we're using it, how we can keep ourselves more secure. Anything else? All right, awesome. I really appreciate you guys. You guys are great listeners. And if you think I need, can you one more slide? There. If you're interested in any of this, whether it's cybersecurity, whether it's technology, you might have seen this already. Be on the lookout for this at your school, because there's some free classes that you can take online. They're self-paced, so you can kind of learn more about basic technology, learn more about IP addresses and how they work, learn more about DNS, or learn more about cybersecurity. So we'll be sending, I think, when I say we, I think Harrisburg University will be sending this out to your school. So if you're interested in learning more about it, make sure you ask for that. All right. Awesome. Thanks again. I appreciate you being here. Did you have questions? Yeah. Yeah, so they're the ones that kind of gather all the data to figure out. I need to show a little bit of things that potentially could harm your computer. I'm gonna switch that information down to people or that way it kind of keeps it up to date. They're really just gathering the people out there.
You can record with me.